The doorknob was still warm from my hand when he grabbed my wrist. Not hard, just enough. Just enough for me to feel the wedding ring he never took off, even now, pressing cold against my skin while his fingers dug in. "Get out of this house," Bradley said. His voice didn't shake. That's what I remember most. How steady it was, like he'd rehearsed it in a mirror. Behind him, in the kitchen I'd paid off 11 years ago, I could hear ice clinking in a glass. Someone laughing softly. Not at a joke. At me. I looked down at his hand on my wrist, then up at his face, and I asked him one question. "Do you know whose name is actually on the deed, sweetheart?" He didn't answer. He just let go. That silence told me everything I needed to know. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I'm 64 years old, and for 31 years I built something out of nothing. I started with a single storage unit in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a folding table, selling refurbished restaurant equipment to diners that were going under during the 90s recession. By the time I was 50, Whitfield Commercial Holdings owned 4 warehouses, a fleet of trucks, and equity stakes in 6 restaurant properties across 2 states. When my husband, Daniel, died of a heart attack 9 years ago, I didn't fold the business. I doubled it. Today, between the holdings company, the properties, and the investment accounts Daniel and I built together, my estate is worth just north of $12 million. My son Bradley is 34. He's an only child, born 8 years into a marriage we'd almost given up hoping for. I loved that boy with a ferocity that scared me sometimes. I paid for his college, a private university, no loans, $180,000 cash. I bought him and his wife Vanessa their first house as a wedding gift. I made him vice president of operations at my own company at age 28, a title, I'll admit now, he had not yet earned. 18 months ago, after 2 minor strokes slowed me down and made my hands tremble when I tried to sign documents, Bradley and Vanessa moved into the family estate to help take care of me. That's the phrase they used. Help. What I didn't know yet was that helping had a price tag, and they intended for me to be the one who paid it, with everything I had. It was a Tuesday in March when I came home early from a doctor's appointment and found 6 of Vanessa's friends in my dining room, drinking champagne out of Daniel's crystal flutes, the ones I keep locked in the china cabinet, the ones I'd only ever used for our anniversary. Vanessa was standing at the head of the table, my chair. She was wearing a cream-colored dress I recognized because I'd seen it in a boutique window on Cherry Street with a $4,000 price tag, and she was holding up a folder, my company's letterhead visible even from the doorway, laughing. "Once the old bird signs off on the trust restructuring," she said, swirling the champagne, "this whole place is basically ours. Bradley's already talked to the lawyer. She won't even understand what she's initialing." The room laughed. One woman raised her glass. "To the inheritance," she said, and they drank. I stood in my own foyer, coat still on, purse still in my hand, and I did not walk in. I turned around, went back out to my car, sat behind the wheel in my own driveway, and I did something I hadn't done in 9 years. I cried. Then I stopped. Then I started making a list. 2 days later, while Bradley and Vanessa were at a wellness retreat in Sedona, $2,200 a night, charged to a company card I hadn't approved, I let myself into the home office Bradley had claimed as his own. In the bottom drawer of his desk, beneath a stack of golf magazines, I found a manila folder labeled Trust Restructuring. EW inside was a durable power of attorney form, already drafted, already notarized with a signature block waiting for mine. It would have transferred control of Whitfield Commercial Holdings to Bradley, effective immediately upon my signature. No requirement of incapacity, no oversight, no undoing it. I confronted him that Friday over dinner, calm, my hands folded in my lap. I found the power of attorney paperwork, Bradley. He didn't even blink. "Mom, that's just standard estate protection. Every wealth advisor recommends a proactive fiduciary transfer once you hit a certain age bracket. It's about liability mitigation, protecting the family from probate exposure. It's not about control. It's about continuity." I nodded slowly. "That makes sense," I said. "I trust you." I did not trust him. I went and found a different lawyer the next morning, one 300 miles away, in Dallas, whose name wasn't in any file at that house. The Dallas attorney, a sharp woman named Priya Raman, helped me pull statements on accounts I technically still controlled, but hadn't looked at closely in over a year, since my hands had started shaking and Bradley had kindly offered to handle the bill pay. $41,000 had moved out of my personal checking account over 14 months, in amounts small enough, $800 here, $1,200 there, that no bank fraud algorithm would ever flag them. A pattern, deliberate, designed for someone exactly like me, someone whose memory people assumed was going soft. When I mentioned, gently, over coffee, that I'd noticed some confusing charges, Bradley set down his mug with theatrical patience. "Mom, those are legitimate maintenance draws for the estate's operational overhead, landscaping, insurance premiums, the security system upgrade. I can send you the reconciliation spreadsheet if it'll put your mind at ease." He sent me a spreadsheet. It was beautiful. It was also almost entirely fabricated, and I only knew that because Priya cross-referenced it against actual vendor invoices, 3 of which belonged to companies that didn't exist. I started carrying my late husband's old digital voice recorder in my cardigan pocket. Daniel used it for business calls. Nobody in that house had ever seen it, and nobody thought to look for it on an old woman who'd started walking slower, forgetting names, asking the same question twice at dinner. That performance began earlier than they realized. I'll get to that. 3 weeks in, the recorder caught this, from the kitchen, Vanessa's voice. She literally asked me the same question about the pool cleaner twice in one conversation last night. "She's not going to last another year, Brad. We need the transfer signed before she has another stroke and some hospital social worker starts asking questions about her finances." Bradley's voice quieter. I know. Just be nice to her at dinner. She still likes feeling included. Feeling included. In my own home. Bought with my own hands. The worst one came on a Sunday. I'd gone up to my room early, claiming a headache, and left my cardigan draped over the back of the den sofa. Recorder still running in the pocket. Vanessa's friend Courtney was over. I heard ice in glasses again. Always ice in glasses with these two. She actually thanked me for helping her find her reading glasses today, Vanessa said, and I heard her laugh, that bright, tinkling laugh she used at church. They were on her head. "Bradley, your mother is a golden goose who's forgotten she's a goose." Bradley laughed too. He didn't correct her. He didn't defend me. He just laughed and said, 18 more months, tops, and we finalize probate. The lawyer said the incapacity filing basically writes itself once we get one more doctor's note. An incapacity filing. They weren't just moving money. They were building a legal case to have me declared unfit, to take the entire $12 million, the holdings company, the properties, all of it, while I was still alive to watch them do it. I had Priya pull one more thread. The doctor's note, Bradley mentioned. It came from a physician named Dr. Aldous Kern, who, it turned out, wasn't treating me at all. He was a rented signature, a semi-retired general practitioner who'd had his license suspended twice for writing fraudulent capacity assessments in 2 prior elder guardianship cases, both of which were now the subject of a state licensing board investigation. Bradley wasn't improvising. He had a system, a network, a price list. I sat in Priya's office with the printed investigation records in my lap, and I did not shake. My hands, for the first time in months, were perfectly still. I made a decision that night in the Dallas hotel room, looking at myself in the mirror over the sink. If Bradley wanted a frail old woman losing her grip on reality, I was going to give him the performance of his life. I let my shoulders round forward when I walked. I started using Daniel's old cane, not because I needed it, but because a cane changes how a room looks at you. I let a slight tremor creep into my voice at dinner, asked Vanessa the same question about the pool cleaner 3 separate times, on purpose, and watched her exchange a satisfied little glance with Bradley each time, thinking she was witnessing decline instead of watching herself be recorded, cataloged, and filed away as evidence. Internally, I was sharper than I'd been in a decade. Every confused pause was me listening. Every forgotten object, my reading glasses, my checkbook, a grocery list, was placed exactly where I wanted it, in rooms I wanted them in, at times I chose. I let Bradley believe he'd already won, because a man who believes he's already won stops checking his flank. I just don't understand all this legal business anymore, I told him one evening, letting my voice quaver as I signed a document he'd handed me, a A document Priya had already confirmed was harmless, a decoy I'd requested precisely so he'd see my signature go soft and shaky on paper, feeding him confidence. "You don't have to understand it, Mom," he said, patting my hand like I was a golden retriever who'd finally learned to sit. "That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm here for." He had no idea how right he'd end up being. Priya and I built the bait together over 6 weeks. I misplaced a folder in the den, one containing what looked like an authentic, updated estate summary. It listed the full $12 million, and beneath it, a single new line: trustee designation pending. Final signature required within 30 days, per attorney recommendation, due to declining capacity. It was fake. Priya drafted it specifically to be found, specifically to dangle a 30-day countdown in front of 2 people who had already shown me exactly how they behaved under a deadline. I also had a small motion-activated camera installed inside a decorative clock on the mantle, the one Daniel bought in Prague on our 20th anniversary, a clock Bradley had never once looked twice at in his life. It fed to an app on a second phone I kept hidden in the lining of my sewing basket, a phone Vanessa didn't know existed. I planted the folder on a Thursday. By Friday night, my hidden phone buzzed once, softly, under the folds of yarn in that sewing basket while I sat 2 rooms away pretending to watch television with my bad hearing turned up too loud. I opened the feed later that night in my bathroom, door locked, volume low. Bradley and Vanessa, in the den, the folder open on the coffee table between them. 30 days, Vanessa said. "We need the lawyer here this week. I don't care what it costs to rush it." "I already called Kern's office," Bradley said. $2,000 gets us the incapacity letter by Monday. That's nothing next to $12 million. And her? Once it's signed. Bradley's voice went flat in a way I'd never heard from him before, not once in 34 years. "Once it's signed, it doesn't matter what happens to her." I sat on the edge of my bathtub for a long time after that. Then I called Priya, and I called someone else, a detective named Ruiz, who had, at my request 3 weeks earlier, quietly opened a file on Dr. Aldous Kern. The trap was set. Now I only had to wait for them to walk into it in front of witnesses. Vanessa's mother's 70th birthday gave us the room. 40 guests. Caterers. My dining room, the same one I'd walked into 11 weeks earlier and turned away from. Bradley stood to give a toast around 9 o'clock, champagne in hand, and somewhere in the middle of his speech about family and legacy, he looked at me, sitting quietly at the far end of the table with Daniel's cane against my chair, and something in him decided to make me the evening's entertainment. "My mother's had a rough couple of years," he said, smiling out at the room. "Getting a little foggy these days, aren't you, Mom? But don't worry, Vanessa and I have got everything handled." A ripple of polite laughter. Vanessa raised her glass toward me, that bright tinkling sound again. "To Eleanor," she said, "who's finally learning to let go." I set down my fork. I did not raise my voice. "I'd like to say something too, if that's all right." The room quieted the way rooms do when they sense a shift in weather. $41,000, I said, moved out of my personal checking account over 14 months. 3 vendor invoices submitted for reconciliation that belong to companies which do not exist. A durable power of attorney drafted before I was ever asked whether I wanted one. I paused, not for effect, for breath. A physician named Dr. Aldous Kern, currently under state investigation for 2 prior fraudulent capacity assessments, hired for $2,000 to write a third. Vanessa's smile had not yet finished collapsing when I kept going. "Once it's signed, it doesn't matter what happens to her." "Those are your words, Bradley," said in my den, 11 days ago, to your wife, believing no one could hear you. I reached into my cardigan pocket and set Daniel's recorder on the table between the flowers and the cake, and I pressed play just long enough for that single sentence to fill the silence in his own voice. Then I picked up one of the crystal champagne flutes Vanessa had been drinking from the day I found her laughing in my dining room, the ones that had been Daniel's, and I let it fall from my hand onto the hardwood, where it broke into 100 bright pieces at Bradley's feet. "That's what 18 years of trust sounds like breaking," I said. "I'd like everyone to please give my son and daughter-in-law some room." Detective Ruiz is outside, and I believe he has some questions. The front door opened right on cue. 2 uniformed officers followed Ruiz in. Someone's phone was already filming. Vanessa's mother, whose birthday it technically still was, sat frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. Bradley didn't shout this time. He just stood there, champagne glass trembling in his hand, and said my name once, very quietly, like a question he already knew the answer to. I didn't answer it. I'd already said everything I needed to say. Within 72 hours, the durable power of attorney was voided by court order, filed by Priya Raman on grounds of fraud and undue influence, and a formal elder financial abuse complaint was opened with the state attorney general's office. Within 2 weeks, Bradley was removed as vice president of operations at Whitfield Commercial Holdings by unanimous vote of the board, a board I had, quietly, restructured 8 months earlier so it could no longer be controlled by a single family vote. Within a month, Dr. Aldous Kern's medical license was permanently revoked following the state board's review, and his prior 2 fraudulent capacity cases were reopened, both resulting in restitution orders to the families he'd defrauded. Within 6 weeks, Vanessa filed for divorce, not out of principle, but because Bradley's assets were now frozen pending the financial abuse investigation, and she had, according to a mutual friend, never signed up to be married to a man under criminal review with no access to money. Bradley was charged with financial exploitation of an elderly person, a felony in the state of Oklahoma. He avoided prison through a plea agreement, restitution of the full $41,000, 5 years probation, and a permanent bar from holding any fiduciary role at Whitfield Commercial Holdings, ever, in any capacity. The 11 employees at the warehouse Bradley had been quietly restructuring, laying off in favor of cheaper, off-book contract labor to pad numbers he could point to as efficiency gains during the transition. Every one of them kept their jobs. I gave each of them a retroactive raise and paid, personally, out of my own account, 3 months of health coverage they'd have otherwise lost during the chaos of the leadership change. That wasn't strategy. That was simply what Daniel would have done. It was late November when Bradley showed up at my door. It had been raining for 2 days straight, the kind of cold Oklahoma rain that gets into your bones, and he stood on my porch in a jacket that wasn't warm enough, holding nothing, no bag, no umbrella, nothing but his own 2 empty hands. "Mom," he said, "I have nowhere else to go." I stood in the doorway for a long moment, looking at my son, and for just a second I let myself remember an 8-year-old boy asleep in the back seat of my car after his first Little League game, trusting me completely with everything he was. Then I looked at the empty space in my hand where Daniel's crystal flute used to be, and I thought about a sentence spoken in this house 11 weeks earlier. Once it's signed, it doesn't matter what happens to her, and my chest went perfectly still. "You told me it wouldn't matter what happened to me, Bradley," I said. "So I'm going to trust that you meant it." I closed the door, gently. No slam. I didn't need one. Later, sitting by the fire with the man I'd started seeing that spring, a quiet, steady widower named Walter who had never once asked me for anything. He took my hand and said nothing at all, and for the first time in a year, the silence in my own house felt like mine again. People will tell you that family means giving endlessly, no matter the cost. But real love was never supposed to require your own erasure. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for the people who actually deserve you, is stop performing weakness and start protecting what you built. If someone in your life has ever mistaken your kindness for an opening, I want to hear about it. Tell me in the comments what you would have done in Eleanor's shoes. If this story hit home, hit like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.